Hello, this is Eric Neal, and I'm bringing to you the final video in our three-part series of Advanced Nutrition and Exercise 601, Hormones, Sleep, Exercise, and Homeostasis. Our learning objectives for today are muscle-building hormones, fat-burning hormones, fat-storing hormones, sleep, diet and exercise, timing and intensity, and homeostasis. We're going to go ahead and start off with muscle-building hormones. For hormonal production, one of the keys to maintaining a high metabolism is by naturally manipulating your hormones by proven strategies to burn fat and build muscle. The hormones associated with muscle building are insulin, testosterone, and growth hormone. Insulin is the most anabolic hormone and is released by the pancreas in response to high blood glucose to lower it by storing in the cells either as glycogen or fat. Consuming carbohydrates and leucine, which is an amino acid, increase insulin production and turn on mammalian target of rapamycin, also known as mTOR, which has an anabolic response. Testosterone increases muscle mass by increasing muscle protein synthesis, which helps increase metabolism. Consuming monounsaturated fats and also saturated fats, vitamin D, and strength training with compound movements of at least 60 to 70% as a minimum of the 1 rep max, and getting at least 8 hours of sleep every night increase testosterone. Elevated growth hormone levels protect muscles from being burned while dieting using fat as a fuel rather than protein. Fasting, high-intensity interval training, high-volume resistance training with short rest breaks, low-carbohydrate diets, and sleep increase growth hormone. From the research, post-workout protein, carbohydrate immediately after and 2 hours after a workout maximizes glycogen replenishment, minimizes muscle damage, and promotes immune function and protein synthesis. There's 2 studies from the University of Connecticut and Texas Medical Branch in Galveston show how the metabolic system works in times of nutrient excess and scarcity. The first study fed participants a leucine essential amino acid carbohydrate supplement, which stimulates mTOR pathway and suppresses AMPK system. The second put participants on a reduced calorie diet, 20% fewer calories, with a high amount of protein intake, approximately 1.5 grams per kilogram, which suppressed the mTOR pathway and protein synthesis. So it tells us going lower on the calories decreases mTOR. Completing cardiovascular training following strength training shuts off mTOR through AMPK. To take advantage of the anabolic effects of mTOR, it will be better to complete cardiovascular training earlier in the day or as the first part of the workout, followed by strength training. This comes from Michael Rudolph from Muscular Development, his article, Muscle Growth Update, Training Order for Optimal Strength and Size. This article changed my way of thinking. For 28 years of my training, 1992 to 2020, I was doing cardiovascular training following my workout. And the reason that I was doing this was because I felt that would be the best route to go because of you're in the fat burning zone after you've been burning off carbohydrates from doing strength training. But I did not know about how the mTOR and AMPK works until I read that article. So this enlightened me, changed my way of thinking, changed my way of training. I no longer do cardiovascular training following my strength training anymore. I always do my cardiovascular training in the morning time and fasted for the most part, which is also something that I changed in my way of thinking, which I will cover a little bit later when we talk about cortisol. Okay, but I do high intensity interval training, 30 seconds hard, 90 seconds easy, with a 5-minute warm up, 5-minute cool down, or I just do low intensity cardio now in the morning time, fasted. And on my cheat day, I'll do my cardio at a high intensity for steady state after I've had a breakfast, a late breakfast that is, and that would be on the weekend. And my second session of cardio would either be in the mid-morning or right before my strength training workout. And it would either be a low to a moderate intensity cardiovascular session. And if it happens to be immediately before my strength training, it would be no more than 30 minutes because I don't want to take away from my strength training workout. So that's something that I've changed up for my workouts based on the research that I did to put together this course. Another study at Baylor found that high-intensity workouts involving either low weight and high reps or higher weight and low reps triggered increased activation of genes that stimulated protein synthesis and inhibited genes that suppress muscle cell development. And that's from the Journal of Strength Conditioning Research. And so pretty much what it's saying is as long as you're getting enough volume in your workouts, you're going to have the ability to build more muscle. However, that 8 to 12 rep range is going to be your optimal range for building more muscle. But you could still build more muscle at low weight, high rep, or at high weight, low rep. Research has found greater growth hormone activity and testosterone response for individuals with enhanced insulin sensitivity. Researchers from Arizona State University found higher intensity exercise has a greater impact on insulin sensitivity, and multiple sets had a greater impact on lowering blood glucose post-workout. The researchers found that volume training has an additive effect on fasting glucose independent of training intensity, and that's from Effects of Intensity and Volume on Insulin Sensitivity During Acute Bouts of Resistance Training from the Journal of Strength Conditioning Research. And the last, growth hormone promotes protein synthesis by increasing insulin-like growth factor 1 in the liver and other tissues. IGF-1 helps stabilize blood sugar, stimulates blood sugar uptake in various tissues, and suppresses sugar release in the liver. In muscle, growth hormone promotes protein synthesis and prevents protein breakdown. It reduces muscle tissue loss, particularly in fast-twitch muscle fibers that occur with age, and that is from growth hormone and IGF research. Now we're going to move on to the fat-burning hormones. Hormones associated with fat burning are cortisol, glucagon, and growth hormone. Cortisol is a necessary catabolic hormone produced in the adrenal gland for metabolism of protein, fats, and carbohydrates, but must be kept under control to avoid muscle loss and increase abdominal fat. Cortisol initially suppresses appetite, but if elevated too long, it stimulates hunger and craving for carbohydrates. But the key thing is about the cortisol, it can work for you, but it can also work against you. So having acute spikes of cortisol is fine, but you don't want to have it chronically elevated because that's what's going to cause you to have the muscle loss, increased abdominal fat, and greater hunger. Glucagon is a catabolic hormone made by the pancreas that breaks down fat and carbohydrates for energy. Glucagon is increased during times of fasting, carbohydrate restriction, or when insulin is low, that results in stimulation of fat by increasing fat-burning enzyme hormone-sensitive lipase that regulates mobilization of free fatty acids that is located directly in the fat cell and is stimulated by epinephrine and blocks the fat-storing hormone lipoprotein lipase. If you look at the figure below for metabolic hormone effects, So the metabolic hormonal signals and activity mediate energy utilization and conservation, and the metabolic hormonal activity is influenced by the dietary macronutrient intake. Okay, so if you look over here at the sites, that's where it's going to be like located. Myo means muscle, sites means cells. So the insulin receptors are in the muscle cells. The hormone insulin is going to upregulate glucose uptake into the muscle cells. Okay, and insulin is going to activate lipogenesis in the liver. So you see the hepatocytes, so that is the liver cells, while glucagon is going to inhibit lipogenesis, and insulin will upregulate cholesterol synthesis, while glucagon downregulates cholesterol synthesis. Then in the adipocytes, that would mean the fat cells, insulin is going to activate lipogenesis, and insulin is going to inhibit lipolysis. It's going to inhibit fat burning. It's going to activate fat generation. Growth hormone is released from the pituitary gland and plays a major role for burning fat. Keep carbohydrates low outside the training window because insulin blocks fat breakdown and interferes with maximal GH release. So timing there is very important. We're going to be covering timing a little bit later in this lesson. So what I'm trying to get your way of thinking is if you're eating a balanced diet, let's try to manipulate when we have our carbohydrates, have those carbohydrates around the time that you're doing your strength training, prior to and after, and then have a longer block throughout the day where you're focused on not consuming any carbohydrates or fasting so that we can have a maximal growth hormone release. Oh, this is the diurnal variations of cortisol. So if you take a look here at this figure, you're going to see at the beginning there at 8 o'clock in the morning is when cortisol is at its highest levels, okay? So since cortisol metabolizes protein, carbohydrates, and fat, this is a good time to do your cardiovascular activity and focus on fat burning. The key thing is that we realize this is just an acute spike in cortisol and not a chronic elevation of cortisol, okay? So this is another area where I've had a change in thinking. I used to teach cortisol is what wakes you up in the morning. That's true because, I mean, it's very high in the morning time. That's why it wakes you up. And I didn't realize that an acute spike in cortisol wasn't going to really make much of a difference. So I went with the philosophy of do not do any fasted cardio because you're going to start burning away muscle and you're going to elevate cortisol levels and lose muscle, gain abdominal fat. But that isn't necessarily going to happen if you play it right. So if you're doing like high intensity interval training or low intensity training in the morning when that cortisol is spiked, it's not going to be a big deal. The big deal is if those levels stay spiked, and I wouldn't recommend doing like a long period of steady state high intensity training if you're fasted though, because you will start using protein as a source of fuel if those carbohydrates aren't available for a long duration high intensity cardio. But key thing is here, cardio in the morning, but you're going to follow up with in the mid-morning, going ahead and getting some food in. And if you are consuming carbohydrates, you'll want to make sure that you get some carbohydrates in there and some leucine. That'll help bring the cortisol down even more. And next, what I want to cover is testosterone. So testosterone is also at its highest levels in the morning time too, at 8 o'clock. But they're not that much lower at 1300 and 1700. And what that means is you get a testosterone to cortisol ratio, okay? So the optimal time for doing a workout for your strength training is going to be when that testosterone to cortisol ratio is highest due to protein synthesis and other factors. However, for me, I like the 1300 time frame better, and maybe it's because the cortisol is elevated a little bit more, making me feel a little bit more energetic. I don't know what it is, but I just happen to feel better at that time. Maybe it's because I get up so early in the morning that maybe my circadian rhythm is shifted. I'm not sure, but I actually feel stronger around lunchtime, unlike what the science shows here at 1700 is when you would be strongest. That's going to take us now to sleep. The body is repaired during non-rapid eye movement sleep, and the brain is repaired during rapid eye movement sleep. During sleep, the body releases growth hormone, which repairs the body and improves the metabolism. Getting enough sleep improves immunity, focus, and weight management. Not enough sleep affects the hormones in the brain, leptin and ghrelin, that control appetite. 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night is optimal. The research says a lack of sleep is linked to obesity, heart disease, arthritis, diabetes, and cancer. It alters leptin and ghrelin, which are important regulators of appetite and energy expenditure and critical for maintaining a healthy weight. Sleep loss increases ghrelin and decreases leptin. The body produces powerful signaling chemicals during sleep deprivation that cause overeating. Chronically sleeping less than 6 hours per night is linked to obesity and type 2 diabetes. Next from Nutrition Today. Okay, shows you earlier testosterone to cortisol, circadian rhythm. Now we're looking at the cortisol-melatonin relationship, circadian rhythm. Notice 10 to 6. Those are the best hours for getting your sleep because the cortisol levels are lower while the melatonin levels are higher. When I retire, this is definitely going to be my sleep schedule. It's no longer going to be going to bed somewhere between 7 and 9 at night and getting up somewhere between 3 and 4. I'm going to definitely enjoy sleeping during the proper times. Something that I do to try to offset the fact that I don't sleep in the perfect circadian time frame is in the morning. I always make sure that I have my lights turned on. I have 5K lights installed in my home. So whenever you're absorbing that light, you're building up melatonin. So that's definitely something any of you shift workers are going to want to consider. Another thing any shift worker should consider is if you're a midnight shift worker, and I don't think most midnight shift workers do this, but they really should. Notice how at 6 o'clock in the morning, all the way through about 5 p.m., how low the melatonin is and how high the cortisol is. You're not going to get good quality sleep during that time period. Now, you're not going to be in the optimal sleep time frame of sleeping from 10 to 6 at night, but if you were to go to bed around 12 or 1 p.m. and sleep until whatever time you need to get up prior to going to work on a midnight shift, you're going to have better quality sleep because at least half of your sleep is going to have an elevated level of melatonin, while probably 3/4 of your sleep is going to be at a lower level of cortisol. Okay, so rather than just immediately going to bed as soon as you get home, like most midnight shift workers do, go work out after your after your work, and then go to sleep later in the afternoon. And if you are a evening shift worker, I would recommend that you go to bed immediately when you get home, so you can get as much of this optimal sleep time period as possible. And here is a 24-hour biorhythm that shows the best times of the day that you're going to perform and how the body works. So you see here, 1700 is when you're going to have the best cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength. Your best sleep is going to be at 2 o'clock in the morning. Higher alertness at 10 o'clock in the morning. So these are all factors to consider when planning your day. And this is what the research says, to just backs up my claim in regards to testosterone and cortisol. Although testosterone is highest in the morning, it has been observed training later in the day can have a better response for power, hypertrophy, or strength endurance protocols. The reason expected for this response is due to better protein synthesis during the period of time with highest testosterone to cortisol ratio, as higher cortisol levels counteract the higher testosterone levels, degrading protein. And this comes from interaction of cortisol, testosterone, and resistance training, influence of circadian rhythms, sport spa. Now we're going to move on to the timing of exercise and diet. So you should be consuming your protein and your carbohydrates before and after resistance training to elevate mTOR activation, so we have a better anabolic response. Avoid cardiovascular training after resistance training because AMPK is turned on during cardiovascular training, and this enzyme inhibits mTOR C1. Additional negative influences that limit mTOR are overtraining, calorie restriction, and sleep deprivation. So if you happen to be spending a lot of time working really hard, you've got the right mindset, but you're just no longer getting the results, and maybe you are guilty of doing this. Let's say you're getting up really early in the morning and you're doing one workout, spending an hour of your time, and you're restricting your calories because you're not getting results anymore, so you feel like you just have to get stricter. And because you're getting up so early in the morning to do that workout, you're being deprived of your sleep. So I used to be guilty of this. I went to bed around 9 or 10, got up around 3 something, didn't get enough sleep, and I was doing about 3 hours a day of working out or more sometimes, and I was restricting my calories. And I came up with a different approach. What I started off first was making sure that I got the proper amount of sleep. I felt guilty. I felt like a hypocrite when I was teaching about sleep at Yellow Ribbon because I wasn't practicing what I was preaching. And so the first step that I did was I started going to bed earlier because I wasn't going to sacrifice too much of my cardio, and I didn't want to drive in traffic and get stressed out. So I decided I'm going to start sleeping earlier and I'm going to tape my TV shows. Next step that I did was, rather than a chronic caloric restriction, I implemented fasting and some of those fasting days would be 24 hours or more of fasting. And then I would also have cheat days and diet breaks to make sure that I wasn't having chronic elevation of cortisol. And then for the training, due to the fact that I stopped doing cardiovascular training following my strength training, there was a lot of training that got cut out of my routine. So now I look at 30 to 60 minutes a day on average, sometimes 90 minutes a day of cardio, and about an hour to 90 minutes of strength training, compared to in the past I was doing every day pretty much 2 hours of cardiovascular and about the same amount of strength training. And so I think I was probably negatively influencing my mTOR. And what I've found now is that I'm getting just as good results, or better, and I don't have to do as much. So I'm getting to eat more on some days, training less, and I'm sleeping more, but yet getting the same or better results than I was before. So I covered like why it's so important to increase mTOR in that window of strength training. Now I want to talk about why we want to shut down mTOR. So the overactivation of mTOR prevents autophagy. Autophagy is an anti-aging process. It's basically the cleaning out, or I could say the cell-eating process, and it increases the risk of cancer if you have an overactivation of mTOR. So let's turn it on and turn it off. That's key word there is timing of exercise and diet. It allows the activation of the system that allows fat loss to occur. Okay? So if you don't care how much muscle mass that you have and you don't want the mTOR turned on, it'd be fine for you to do cardiovascular training following your strength training. But if you want to maximize the effects from your strength training, then we'll turn off that mTOR. But like I said, if it doesn't matter to you, if you want to activate AMPK following a strength training workout and prevent mTOR from doing its maximal effect, then doing cardio after your strength training would be just fine and maybe optimal. Before I move on to this slide here on diet and intensity of exercise, I'm going to share an article. It's a study conducted by Ogasawara. It's examined different mTOR levels achieved when performing endurance training before and after weightlifting. Results of study was AMPK reduced mTOR when performing endurance after weight training, but the opposite result when training endurance prior to weightlifting, which results greater mTOR activation and a more anabolic environment for muscle growth. This is from the article, The Order of Concurrent Endurance and Resistance Exercise Modifies mTOR Signaling and Protein Synthesis in Rat Skeletal Muscle, from the American Journal of Physiology, Endocrinology, Metabolism. Diet and intensity of exercise. Diets lower in carbohydrates and higher in medium chain triglycerides will enhance lipolysis at rest and during exercise. Low to moderate intensity cardiovascular exercise will burn fat directly, but less calories will be burned. In addition, during the moderate intensity exercise, some of the fat that is burned comes in the form of intramuscular triglycerides. High intensity exercise will use carbohydrates, protein converted to carbohydrates by gluconeogenesis, or lactate as fuel during exercise, but will indirectly burn fat during rest after the workout through EPOC. High-intensity interval training uses carbohydrates as energy, but works as a powerful fat burner through positive altered hormones. into some of the research now. There was a study at the University of Western Australia showed that high-intensity interval training reduced post-exercise food intake for 38 hours compared to a moderate intensity 60% of max effort workout. Following high-intensity interval training, subjects had lower levels of ghrelin, a gut hormone that increases appetite. And this is from the International Journal of Obesity. Now I'm going to provide a little bit more additional information about intramuscular triglycerides as fuel, which we just covered in the last slide. So what they are little fat globules found within the muscles. And the body taps into them as a source of energy when carbohydrates are not available for fuel. So according to studies, participants exercising at 25, 65, and 85% of their VO2 max were compared for amount of fat burned. The participants exercising at 65% of the VO2 max were found to have the highest amount of calories come from fat due to intramuscular triglyceride usage as fuel at a moderate intensity. Okay, so if you, one thing about this with VO2 max, I want you to think more in terms of the Carbonian method, where you use 220 minus your age, or if you know your maximum heart rate, subtract your resting heart rate from that, and then multiply times the percentage and add the resting heart rate back. Okay, that's how you use the Carbonian method. I know that has to be what's being used here, rather than just 220 minus your age, or if you know your maximum heart rate, times these percentages, because I know 25% would be way too low of a heart rate where you guys should be exercising. So we'll just start off from there. So they didn't specifically say that, but because they're talking about the VO2 max, and because of the fact that 25% is that's just too low of a rate, we know that there's exercise going on through Carbonian method here. So what's happening is, since 25% is such a low rate, even with the Carbonian method or based off of VO2, not much oxygen is being increased. Okay, so this level of exercise is so light that the amount of calories being burned aren't a whole lot more than the amount of calories at rest, as compared to 40% or 65% or 85%. I wish that 40% was included in here also. Now, I don't know that 40% would have had more intramuscular triglycerides being used, but I do believe, based off my own experience using a metabolic cart on doing a VO2 max, that at 40% of the VO2 max is the optimal range for fat burning. And for me, I burned more fat calories at that rate too, because it was so close to 100%. But intramuscular triglycerides begin to be used when you're more of in a moderate range, and maybe that's why they've got 65%. Although I believe in most cases you'd be burning less calories of fat at 65%. I guess because the focus is intramuscular triglycerides, that's what they went with. And then we had 85%, and that would have been pretty much zero. Because when you get that high of an intensity when you're training, you're burning nothing but carbohydrates. So intramuscular triglycerides are used more in that moderate intensity range. So we want to talk about improvement to hormones. So some ways to naturally boost your growth hormone: intermittent fasting, high intensity interval training, short rest breaks between sets for strength training, and supplementation with melatonin. That will help increase growth hormone. I no longer supplement with melatonin, and the reason why is because melatonin is also a diuretic, and due to the fact that I would like to have uninterrupted sleep, I no longer consume that. That way I'm not getting up using the bathroom 2 or 3 times in the night and can get better sleep. But I do keep it on hand because what I found is sometimes when you're traveling, it can be rough to get to sleep. Or if I'm just having a hard time getting to sleep, then I'll go ahead and take some. And I've also found one negative effect of fasting, whenever you do it for a long period, like 24 hours or more, is it can be hard to get to sleep sometimes. And that's probably due to elevated catecholamines and that type of stuff is why I would think that fasting could cause that. So I like to have melatonin on hand, but I don't rely on it anymore. Now, if you're not getting up using the bathroom in the middle of the night, I definitely recommend that you would use it then. It's safe. Maybe I shouldn't say recommend. I should say you recommend that you research it and make your own decision. So I don't like to make recommendations when it comes to any type of supplementation or any herbals. But what I can tell you is that melatonin does increase, and it's a very minute level, but it increases growth hormone through the pineal gland whenever you're sleeping. So that would be a good reason to take it. And for better sleep, I can tell you that it does it does make you feel better rested after your sleep. Ways that I go the route of natural boost in melatonin by the 5K light bulbs and by the diet I consume. So I try to make sure I'm consuming foods before bed, about 2 hours before bed, like pumpkin seeds and Greek yogurt and blueberries. It's like my favorite bedtime snack. I don't know that the blueberries do anything, but it's got a lot of other healthful benefits and makes it taste a whole lot better too. But you get the sedative effect from dairy, and the pumpkin seeds definitely have a lot of tryptophan, which will help you produce more melatonin and make you feel sleepier. And then when it comes to ways to improve the thyroid hormone, you should consume iodine-rich foods like kelp and seaweed. And you should do refeed days at least once a week. I covered refeeds in our diets course. So that's where it's a nice word for a cheat day, basically, is what it is. So you just pick a day out of the week that you're going to go higher on your calories and higher on your carbohydrates, or if you're eating a very low-fat diet, higher on your fat intake. And this helps also to improve the leptin and prevents chronic high levels of cortisol. Some of the research says that Israeli scientists found that anabolic hormones such as testosterone and growth hormone, in addition to inflammatory chemicals, increase during an interval workout consisting of 250-meter runs with 3-minute rest between repetitions. And that comes from the Journal of Strength Conditioning Research. Also, catecholamines prevent protein breakdown by inhibiting calprotectin levels. So that could be a reason for high-intensity interval training, preventing muscle loss, because the inhibition of the calprotectin levels. And the catecholamines rise when you're doing very high-intensity work. That is from calpain system regulates muscle mass and glucose transporter GLUT4 turnover from the Journal of Biology and Chemistry. And for the melatonin, also, it could be a good idea to take that prior to a workout. Just make sure if you're doing that that's a workout at home or somebody else is driving if you're going to the gym, because you don't want to end up falling asleep at the wheel. So this is what this study says. It says, in addition to supplementing with melatonin before sleep, it is also beneficial to take pre-workout. A study by NASA compares groups of people taking 0.5 milligrams of melatonin and 5 milligrams of melatonin and a placebo before workout. For males, 5 milligrams appears to increase serum growth hormone, while concomitantly lowers somatostatin levels. However, when combined with resistant exercise, both melatonin doses positively impacts growth hormone levels in a manner not entirely dependent on somatostatin. And now we're finishing up with homeostasis. So homeostasis is the regulator, okay? Really good one to talk about when we talk about homeostasis. I'm going to give a few examples actually. Is insulin and glucagon. Okay, the body wants to maintain a normal blood glucose. So in times when you get low blood glucose, your body is going to release glucagon to bring it back to normal. When the blood glucose gets high, the body's going to release insulin to bring it back to normal. Whenever you're not getting enough sleep and not eating enough, when you have chronic levels of hypocaloric intake, your body is going to release the hormone ghrelin, and it's going to make you hungry. Whenever you're getting enough to eat and enough sleep on a regular basis, your body is going to release leptin. And leptin works a whole lot like blood glucose and insulin. Type 2 diabetics are their body produces insulin, but it doesn't use it well. It has trouble making it to the working muscle. And people that are type 2 diabetics most of the time are overweight or obese. And same problem with leptin. Somebody that is very overweight or obese is going to have all kinds of leptin available, but it doesn't seem to want to work. So that's an unfortunate incident there. And when somebody is lighter weight, they're going to have less leptin, but the thing is it'll work better as long as they're not losing sleep and restricting their diet so much. And then the last one I want to cover is, I actually want to cover two more. I want to cover how the body works with water. So if you're drinking lots and lots of water, you're going to get rid of lots and lots of water. And if you all of a sudden stop drinking it, you're still going to be getting rid of it for a little period of time. So the body will catch up 36 hours, 72 hours. It's a different time level for different people. This is an area where bodybuilders try to time things, and now some bodybuilders are even claiming this is not good science anymore. That's up for debate. But what happens is after so long, homeostasis kicks in, the body does its self-regulation, and the hormone aldosterone gets produced, which causes you to hold water. So if you start not drinking water and just having sips too early, and competing in bodybuilding, you're going to go on stage holding water because you started too early. So that's why a lot of bodybuilders, about 36 hours, that's when they'll start doing their sipping. And so their body still believes it needs to get rid of 2 gallons of water a day, like it's been doing the past 8.5 days. And they do that to try to get like the most shredded look when they're on stage. But if they don't time it right, the aldosterone kicks in, and then after all of that hard work and suffering from not consuming enough water, the hormone kicks in, and they just start holding it anyways. So that's just another example of that regulation by the body. After so long, the body's going to do something to regulate itself. And the last one is cold weather. So if you're in a really cold environment for so long, what your body's going to do is it is going to start converting the white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue to help keep the body warm, because the body's not going to be able to deal with that cold environment for so long. So it's going to regulate and get the body used to it. So those are just all examples of homeostasis in play. So the recommendations discussed earlier in this course to include fasting, refeeds, reverse dieting, turning on and off mTOR are some methods of manipulating hormones to prevent homeostasis from affecting metabolism in a negative way. Okay, so key word there is, I said, affects metabolism. Okay, so I would like to kind of break this down here on this slide, where we've got homeostasis right there in the middle, and we've got metabolism over to the right. I would like to say that this is sort of like a cause and effect. So homeostasis is the tendency to maintain a stable and relatively constant internal environment despite the changing external environmental conditions. Okay, then you have the effect. Metabolism is the collection of all chemical reactions occurring in an organism. We don't have any categories for homeostasis for production, but for metabolism, you have anabolism and catabolism, so the building and breaking. Changing internal properties. Homeostasis regulates and keeps the internal properties constant. Due to the metabolism of the body, certain properties of the internal could be changed. Involvement of hormones and enzymes. Normally, hormones are involved in controlling homeostatic regulations. Enzymes are involved as catalysts, and they control metabolic pathways. Control. The nervous system controls the homeostatic regulations. Specific proteins in the body control the metabolic reactions. Metabolic rate can be decreased or increased by the homeostasis regulation mechanisms. Homeostasis cannot be controlled by the metabolism. So homeostasis controls metabolism. Metabolism doesn't control homeostasis. So to sum everything up, homeostasis is the tendency to maintain a stable, relatively constant internal environment inside the body. On the contrary, metabolism is the collection of all chemical reactions occurring in an organism. Homeostasis is necessary for metabolism, but metabolism cannot control homeostasis. Furthermore, enzymes control metabolism while the nervous system controls homeostasis. This is a summary of the differences between homeostasis and metabolism. Okay, so just to sum everything up, the reason that I created this course was from many, many years of learning And over the past year of doing a lot of research, I try to come up with everything I could think of that is going to help you control your weight management. I know that there's many of you out there who might feel helpless. You know, you work so hard and you diet so hard, and eventually the results just stop happening, or you fall off the wagon because how can you continue doing something so strict for so long and fall backwards and gain more weight than you had before you even started. And I can identify with you on this, and this is why I did all this research, and it's so important to me and close to my heart. I wanted to throw in techniques that will offset homeostasis, okay? Because anybody knows that calories in versus calories out. If you burn more calories than what you consume, then you're going to have weight loss, okay? But homeostasis kicks in, and now you're consuming the same amount of calories, but you're not burning as many calories, and you really can't control it, okay? And hormones start coming into play, causing all kinds of like weird stuff going on in your body. So what I've tried to do here with this course is teach you ways to trick your body, okay? So that you can continue getting results, and in a way that is something that you can maintain for life, okay? Now, some of the things that I've taught are not sustainable. And when I say that, what I mean is you're going to need to cycle on and off. If you're doing something that's so strict that you cannot sustain that for a lifestyle diet, you would consider this to be a phase thing. It's a cycle, and then the key part of that cycle is not going crazy and just eating anything that you want, or just like being lazy and not exercising at all, okay? So I hope that everything that I've brought in this trilogy of courses will help you develop the exercise and diet and sleep habits that you need to have a healthy lifestyle. Thank you for joining me in these courses.